Hola mis amores, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sich. If you're here for the first time, please click the subscribe button, turn the red into gray and become part of the Amores family. If you are a returning Amor, thank you so much for always supporting the channel, for being here. So for today we are continuing with our lesson on apartheid. I did a video on the apartheid laws in South Africa and Namibia. So today we are going to look at what made apartheid to come to an end, the factors, the event that happened or that transpired for apartheid to come to an end. Again, my focus will be on South Africa and Namibia because without South Africa, there is no apartheid. And apartheid ending in South Africa also meant it would end in Namibia because Namibia was a colony of South Africa. So today, let's look at some of those factors that led to the ending of apartheid. I'm first going to start off with political factors, then get into the economic factors of apartheid coming to an end. So first of all, let's start off in 1952. South Africa launched a defiance campaign. I spoke a little bit about in the video, but let me just get more into detail. So they launched a defiance campaign. Well, should I say Black South Africans launched a defiance campaign in South Africa, which was to protest every single law or act that apartheid passed. So they started using all these entrances that were meant for white people. They started using the benches, the beaches that were only meant for white people. They even started applying to schools that were only meant for white South Africans. So they decided to go against the Separate Amnesties Act of 1952. So they were doing the opposite of what the Separate Amnesties Act was, saying, because they just felt like, why should we do it? Why should we give in to what the white South Africans wanted in our own land? So the next one we're going to talk about, the next event that also, kind of led to the apartheid coming to an end in South Africa, was the Freedom Charter, which was passed on the 26th of June 1955. So it was actually compiled by the members of the ANC. So what they did is that they wrote a document, and in this document they stated what they wanted. They said they wanted equal rights for all South Africans, regardless of being black, white, colored, Indians, that everybody should receive free and compulsory education. Because I remember I mentioned that with the Bantu Education Act, black people had to pay for their school. It was not compulsory, but when it came to the white people, their education was free. So they asked that education be free and compulsory for everybody. They wanted labor laws that stated that, people could receive, wages that would just living wages for shorter hours, not them having to work for longer hours and get little pay. So basically what the Freedom Charter was all about was just them wanting equal rights for black and white people. On the 9th of August 1956, the women of South Africa, about 26,000 of South African women, black women to be specific, marched to the Union Building in Pretoria, and they were demanding for the abolition of the pass law. Remember, with the pass law, every black person had to walk around with a dompas, and they did not like that. They did not like the fact that they had to be made to feel like they were foreigners in their own land. So they marched to the building so that they could just demonstrate outside and say that we want this pass law to be abolished in South Africa. So in June 1961 saw the establishment of a new body or a new organization in South Africa, and that was Umkhonto weSizwe, and which also is abbreviated as MK, or as people call it, the Spear of the Nation. And that was formed by the ANC, which was this was actually a guerrilla group for South Africans, black South Africans, and their main aim was that they would be targeting buildings of the government, destroying them just so that the government could listen to them. Not that they wanted to destroy them, just that if peace cannot make the government listen to us, then let violence be the one to make them listen to us. So they started, a lot of black South Africans actually started joining MK because they were now tired of peaceful demonstrations. And I said also the same thing happened in Namibia in 1962. The People's Liberation Army of Namibia was formed under SWAPO. It was the same thing, they said peaceful talks are not going to get us anywhere, so let us fight. Let us take up these arms against the South Africans to see if they do realize that we are serious, that we are not happy with the apartheid system in Namibia and South Africa. Another organization was the Pan-African Congress, or PAC, that also formed its own. Please forgive me if I'm butchering the name, but the name was Ponto okay, which meant standing alone. But this one was also a liberation army for the PAC. Again, it was the same thing. They wanted to fight for the rights of black people in South Africa and make the government listen to them. So a lot of people again started joining the Standing Alone organization, or the Standing Alone Liberation Army, so that they could fight against the South African white government. Still continuing with the political reasons of why apartheid came to an end, or some of these factors are the ones that led, to the government considering that maybe it's about time that we give this country its independence and also just move away with and also just move away with apartheid. Another organization that was formed was the Black Consciousness movement that was formed in 1968, the founder being Steve Biko. So remember, with South Africans, the white South Africans, they made people believe that black people were inferior, that they made us believe that our history was no good. So Steve Biko saw that the only way to liberate an African person or an African man is by liberating their mind. What they did, they were mentally liberating the black South Africans, or the black people, by telling them that they were superior, that they should be proud of their culture, they should be proud of their history, they should be proud of their heritage, that they should see themselves as valued people. So once people started seeing themselves in that image, then they would start fighting for that, because you cannot tell me that I'm superior or that I am of value and I'm still living under apartheid or still being made to feel like I'm inferior. So once they were liberated mentally, that's when they now started to fight, and all these strikes, all these marches, all these protests against the government was just building up in South Africa, because people were realizing who they were. So Black Consciousness movement was that movement that was now working with the minds. We have MK and Mponto, or Standing Alone, working physically, but Black Consciousness was all about changing the mindset of the black South Africans. Unfortunately, their leader Steve Biko died in 1977 in police custody in prison. At the time, a lot of African countries were receiving independence, because a lot of protests, a lot of strikes that were happening in South Africa happened between the 50s and the 80s. So a lot of African countries were gaining independence. Some of those countries were the neighbors of South Africa. And if a black African country can gain independence from the superior white people, then I'm sure the South Africans felt like we could do the same. And that is the independence of Angola. So Angola gained its independence in 1975, right? And then there was a civil war between UNITA and MPLA. So South African Defense Force went into Angola to fight against the MPLA, but they were defeated. Now the defeat of those people made the black Africans to be psychologically aware of what they were capable of. It gave them this psychological victory that if South Africans could be defeated by black Angolans, then also black South Africans can actually defeat the white South Africans. So it just gave them more oomph, or it just it encouraged and motivated them to keep fighting, or to keep going against the apartheid laws, knowing that there would be victory for them. I'll also talk about how the independence of Namibia actually made South Africa want to gain its independence. They're like, what? A small country like Namibia can actually make South Africa to give them their independence. So we black South Africans can also put pressure on the white government to give us our independence. So the independence of other African countries, especially their neighboring countries, made the black people want to fight more for the independence. And that meant there was so much havoc, there was so much chaos within South Africa, which made the South African leaders at the time think twice about the apartheid system. As I mentioned before, in 1976, South Africa saw the uprising, the Soweto uprising, and a lot of children were killed. But what that sparked, it sparked a lot of protests, a lot of stayaways, a lot of boycotts, a lot of marches. Now people were angry. A lot of black South Africans were angry. They really, really now wanted their independence. They really wanted to be liberated from the apartheid system. So it saw a lot of protests, a lot of marches in the country. As I said, that brought so much chaos, that brought so much havoc. And I'll talk about the economic factors that came about because of the protests, because of the strikes, the stayaways that happened in South Africa. The UDF, the United Democratic Front, was formed by different delegates from different organizations, from different political parties, from different trade unions, and they all just wanted to fight for better labor laws. They wanted to fight for better living conditions of all South Africans. So we're going to talk about the economic factors just in a little bit. Quickly, just coming back to Namibia, let's talk about how, you know, South Africa changed its direction to finally give Namibia its independence. Is that SWAPO was gaining momentum internationally. Not only that, but also a lot of people were joining the plan. And that meant that the South African Defence Force was being outnumbered. They were starting to fear and seeing that these people are not playing, they are serious about gaining their independence. And not only that, it was also just the sole representative of the Namibians. The United Nations and other organizations only recognized Namibia. So they were putting so much pressure on South Africa. And then there was the Western Contact Group, which was made up of USA, France, Britain, West Germany, and Canada. So those countries came together and they were all against the apartheid system in Namibia, and they recommended actually a resolution to the United Nations about what they would like to see South Africa do to Namibia. They were against a lot of happenings in Namibia. Some of them even put sanctions that they were not going to continue trading with South Africa. This then brings me to the economic factors that led to the president or the people in charge of apartheid to consider giving up apartheid. Some of the economic reasons that might have led to apartheid coming to an end was that there was little economic growth in both Namibia and South Africa. Why? Because number one, a lot of people stopped doing business with South Africa. Number two, there was just a lot of boycotts, a lot of strikes, a lot of marches, that if people are not going to work, that means that there's no money coming in. In 1972, the contract laborers or the contract workers in Namibia decided to go on a strike. They stopped working, they put their shovels down, and they said, we're not going to work unless you give in to our demands. The same happened the following year in South Africa, in Durban, 1973, where again workers came together and they're just like, we're not going to work anymore. We are stopping our work here. You cannot expect us to work for this long and you give us this little pay. We cannot be segregated just because of our skin color. So people not working, as I said, meant there was no money, and if there's no money, that means the country's economy is going down. So what did the South African government start doing? They decided to source workers from outside. So they went to neighboring countries such as Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, some of the countries that they went to just to source workers to come and work, because South Africans and Namibians refused to work. They said they would only work if the government listened to them. A lot of trade unions were formed, and most of them, they wanted labor laws to be passed. But these labor laws had to be the same as international standards, not labor laws that only favored one side and the other one is not favored or is against the other one. So a lot of trade unions started fighting for the right of contract laborers in South Africa. So who were the business owners? A lot of business owners in South Africa and Namibia were white people. As I said, people were boycotting, people were marching. Nobody wanted to go to work. The businesses were suffering. This then made a lot of business people in South Africa, white business people, to start, rethinking about the apartheid system. They said, hey, my business is being affected because these people that are supposed to be working for me are not working. So maybe why don't you just consider, putting an end to apartheid? Because if you don't put an end to apartheid, the end is going to be for my business. So this is to say that a lot of white South Africans started also being against apartheid. They started to speak against apartheid. But most of them were not talking against or speaking up against apartheid because they didn't like it. They were speaking up because they didn't like the effects of these black people striking. So they're like, my business is affected, I'm losing a lot of money, so you know what, let's just call it quits. We had a few good years of apartheid, we have enjoyed it, but now this is not good anymore. We are putting an end to this. Maybe let's just consider giving the freedom to these people. Let us just consider having equal rights for everybody, as long as my business is going to survive. So a lot of white business people also started joining the black people against these marches. Another group of white people that started to join the black people was the workers of the church, or the clergy of the church, because for religious reasons, they're like, you cannot say we are all made in the image of God, we are all equal before God, and some are treated inferior while the other ones are considered superior. So they decided that they were not going to be in support of apartheid, but rather they would be supporting the black people to fight against apartheid. Another group of people that joined the black people were the Afrikaners themselves. The reason why these people joined is that they remembered in 1948, before the elections, that D.F. Malan campaigned that, you know, black and white people would have different lives, they were going to enjoy the benefits of, you know, having apartheid. But as the black people now started striking, as you know, there's just chaos and havoc in the country, those promises were not being fulfilled anymore. Why? Because a lot of money was being directed towards war. There was a lot of fighting in Namibia, there's fighting in South Africa, and there's fighting in Angola. So South Africa was in 3 different places, and that meant money had to be given out to supply, you know, the soldiers that were in these 3 different countries to keep order, to maintain order. So that meant that little money was being directed to all the promises that have been made. So they're like, hey, if you are not going to keep up to your promise, we are going to join this group of black people and we are going to be fighting against the apartheid system. Now I want to come to Namibia a little bit and speak about Anthony Bushke being one of the lawyers, a white lawyer. He was a supporter of SWAPO, he was a member of SWAPO, and he was one of those white people that were supporting the black people to fight for their rights, you know, to stand up for them in court. So him being a white person also meant that other white people saw that they, you know what, we should actually take a stand against apartheid and join the black South Africans and black Namibians. Anthony Bushke was unfortunately killed off just before Namibia gained its independence. I think now one of the major ones that really affected South Africa to say, you know what, maybe it's time, was the economic sanctions that came from the United Nations. A lot of countries stopped doing business with South Africa. They had, you know, they had projects, but they did not have buyers. They were not allowed to import, they were not allowed to export. So a lot of countries, either in Africa or beyond Africa, they stopped doing business with South Africa. And if your economy is limping, that means you cannot advance. So economic sanctions from the United Nations, from the OAU, really hit South Africa very hard, to the point that they started to, you know, have negotiations or consider giving apartheid a break. I mean, consider giving up apartheid and granting Namibia its independence. So these were all the factors that made the government of South Africa at the time to sit down, the administrators to sit down and look, hey guys, and say, hey guys, this is what we have in our hands. And I don't think we're gonna get out of this one. You know, we have had a good, you know, rule. We had good years of apartheid, but if we don't stop, we're going to destroy this country ourselves. So maybe let us consider putting a stop to apartheid. So in 1989, FW de Klerk became the leader of South Africa. He took over from Botha, whose health was failing him after suffering a stroke. He was not in a position to lead a country anymore. So FW de Klerk became the leader of South Africa. So him coming on and taking over the seat and finding all these problems was just too much for him. I mean, anybody in his position would have maybe considered ending apartheid. He was a white South African. So, I mean, it's only right and fair that he maybe said, you know what, apartheid is not doing us any good. Let us give these countries their independence and also just put an end to apartheid right here in South Africa. So on the 13th of December 1989, he went and met up with the ANC leader Nelson Mandela to just have discussions, talks about the way forward. And in February of 1990, he unbanned all political parties, because political parties such as the PAC, the ANC, communist parties, all those parties that were against apartheid, they were banned. So in 1990, in February, he unbanned all political parties, and in the same month he released, or he asked for the release of all political prisoners, and one of them was Nelson Mandela. So in the same year, on the 2nd of May 1990, the talks to end apartheid finally began. Political parties were coming together, you know, sitting together in harmony and just discussing and coming up with the best ways to move forward. So the talks for apartheid finally began, and South Africa in 1994 finally had its first free and fair elections for everybody. And on the 27th of April 1994, South Africa was declared a free democratic country. Nelson Mandela was the president, and FW de Klerk was one of the vice presidents of South Africa. So those were some of the reasons that led to the end of apartheid. Apartheid was bound to come to an end. Having put all those factors together, you had to give the country its independence and well as put an end to apartheid. So tell me, do you think the reasons I gave you were enough for FW de Klerk to declare apartheid as a thing of the past and give Namibia its independence? Or do you think that, you know, they are not enough? And also, if you have other reasons as to why apartheid came to an end in both South Africa and Namibia, please let me know in the comment section. As I say, I always learn from you just as you learn from me. Okay, Miss Amores, if you loved this video and you've watched all the way until now and have not subscribed, please, I beg you have nothing to lose, please subscribe. It's absolutely free, and turn on your notification bell so that every time I upload a video you get notified. Thank you so much, Miss Amores, for always being here. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you guys next time in my video. From Miss Sich, it's adios, Miss Amores.